Aviões supersónicos, aviões elétricos, aviões autónomos, aviões com outros formatos como o Flying V, aviões a hélice e até mesmo aviões que parecem um drone gigante para transportar passageiros entre centros urbanos. Se há uma coisa que podemos garantir é que todo o setor trabalha para atingir uma maior eficiência e também maior sustentabilidade. Ora, isto origina muitos protótipos, muitos testes e um programa para desenvolver o avião do futuro. Mas eu só tenho uma coisa aqui a dizer, pelo menos uma dúvida. Independentemente do tipo de avião que for inventado por nós portugueses, podemos continuar a bater palmas quando o avião aterrar? Sem piloto parece-me estranho. Eu peço a todos os profissionais aqui do setor presentes, e que são muitos, que por favor pensem neste assunto com muito carinho e muito empenho, como ele merece. Para nos falar deste assunto, mas espero de muitos mais, e muitos mais, sobretudo desafios e oportunidades da aviação do futuro, eu chamo aqui ao palco o diretor regional de Affairs Europe da IATA, Raimonds Gruntins. Foi bem dito o nome? Não, bem... Raimonds Gruntins.
As good as it gets, as good as it gets.
Okay, thank you.
Obrigado.
The stage is yours.
Obrigado. Good morning, Your Excellency, the Mayor of Ponte de Sor, our gracious host, Your Excellency, Secretary of State, Madam President, everyone who is joining us online, thank you for being with us. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the the Portugal Air Summit and its wonderful, wonderful organizing team for organizing this event. I've just learned this morning that we are about 70 countries presented today. So this just confirms that this event is fantastic, not only in Portugal, but far beyond. And I'm also very pleased to see that IATA Global Training Conference is taking place here in Ponte de Sor today. Flying for a world of opportunities, such a wonderful aspirational title, but it does come with a series of challenges. But then again, nothing is impossible for an industry that essentially converts dreams into reality. And I think the very act of flying is just one of them. Today, aviation is still on recovery mode, which actually represents a wonderful opportunity to rethink, rebuild better, smarter, probably more inclusive, and more sustainably. I understood from the previous speech that Madam President were talking about rebuilding better, so I think we can align that we are here to rebuild better. In many aspects of everyday life, it seems that life has gone back to pre-COVID levels, like if pandemic has never existed, but aviation has not reached that level yet. And we must not forget, and hopefully we have to learn from the lessons learned and taught, that probably was the largest crisis our industry has ever seen. In absence of harmonized measures, border closures, travel restrictions based on non-scientific evidence has really reduced our industry to ashes, completely paralyzed. And this image alone should be a constant reminder for the obligation for the industry stakeholders, including governments and particularly regulators, to work hand in hand. The freedom of movement should always be a priority, and we should never forget that. I know somebody of you will say, but he's paid to do so, but I cannot stress enough the value of aviation. Value of aviation on economies and societies alike. The images of families being reunited after years of separation are very, very vivid. But so are those of medical stuff and medical equipment flowed by air cargo while the borders were closed and population were locked in. Connecting, uniting people, enabling cultural, leisure, businesses, the list is endless. And our mission is to ensure that the industry remains sustainable, both economically and environmentally. Speaking on environment, last week marks the end of ICAO assembly that meets every 3 years. A very remarkable step forward. by states aligning both with the Paris Agreement and our resolution on flying net zero by 2050, a resolution that the entire aviation airline industry agreed in IATA annual general meeting in October last year. The significance of long-term aspirational goal agreement cannot be underestimated. The aviation industry's commitment requires supportive government policies, and we expect much stronger policy initiatives in the area of decarbonization, particularly in the area of helping in production of sustainable aviation fuels, because volumes are not enough. We are not going to make it if SAF is not available. And the global willpower that was manifested in ICAO, to decarbonize aviation, which ultimately underpins this agreement, must follow every delegate back home to lead to practical policy actions on the state level, as it needs to support the industry to its ambition, as we are committed to make it. Now, it is more than critical than ever that governments do not chip away bonding CORSIA as the only market-based measure for tackling the global aviation emissions. So what about challenges? We are currently experiencing eventful, to say the least, geopolitical environment. War in Ukraine was mentioned, spiking fuel prices, possible economic recession, inflation, what else? Energy crisis. The list goes on and on. But the aviation industry has shown one thing over its existence: it is resilience. In parallel, we continue to work with traditional industry-specific issues such as capacity, slot regulation, passenger rights, and of course, further reducing our environmental footprint. On capacity, to some extent, also Lisbon Airport, but particularly maybe London Heathrow, Amsterdam Schiphol, have shown the difficulty that the industry is still having in facilitating seamless travel experience, despite the fact that passenger figures are still below 2019 levels. Staffing issues, for example, among border guards, safety agents, ground handlers, are just on top of the list, giving examples of those crises. And efforts by governments, regulators, airports together has to be made to recruit the personnel to minimize the gap that airlines are currently facing. But it's not all about the ground capacity. We also have an issue on air capacity. As pre-COVID times, we continue witnessing delays, and recent traffic control strike in France is a very strong witness that the result-oriented approach with strong KPIs needs to be implemented by an independent body. Europe needs to modernize its airspace. And this is also all happening because we experience heavy airspace closures due to the crisis and due to the war in Ukraine. And one thing that I wanted to plead to Portuguese regulator, I also hear that in midst of capacity crisis, we're still considering increasing airport charges. And I think we are really looking for strong regulation in this respect, Madam President, because airlines cannot recover past losses that they will be never ever able to recover, and investments needs to go hand in hand with investments. So that would be really my plea here today, to have a strong regulator for any increases that might affect airlines. I'm also calling to regulators in general for smarter regulation to help industry to recover. Airline slots, for example. The capacity crunch is a stark reminder that we are not back to normal. And airlines do need some flexibility and some certainty, particularly if their operations are affected by an external factor. We do regret that EU Parliament disregarded technical evidence provided by airlines explaining why returning to pre-COVID slot allocation is still premature. But now when the voting has taken place, we do urge institutions and stakeholders to reach agreement and provide the certainty to airlines. Delays, smarter or not smarter regulations all reflect the passenger experience. EU 261, passenger consumer protection regulation. EU 261 file cannot be always put on the bottom of the list. The current presidency of EU Council, but also the upcoming ones, need to work hand in hand with the industry and ensure a collective agreement fair to all involved parties. And last but not least, Europe, more than any other region, has taken a leadership role how to tackle climate change, with Fit for 55 package on everybody's mind. As I mentioned last year, industry reached the phenomenal agreement of flying net zero 2050. But for airlines, the challenge is absolutely immediate. Electric and hydrogen-powered engines are still in very, very early stages, so sustainable aviation fuels are the only possibility to reach this important commitment. And again, we of course are looking for governments, investors to provide necessary framework to facilitate scalable production and also price reduction for affordable sustainable aviation fuels. If we would put all sustainable aviation fuels together in the world, it would not meet the needs of a European carrier. It would not. We are lacking in volumes. Single European sky is another solution for an environmental puzzle, so reachable, so tangible, but we have been talking about it for 20 years without much success. Too many member states are hiding behind their sovereignty or any other excuses, and those states must be held accountable for unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary damage they are causing. This initiative would benefit passengers, but also environment. And lastly, multimodality. Europe leads the discussion on multimodality with countries as France and Germany in front seat. Multimodality should focus on improving connectivity for passengers in the most environmentally friendly fashion. It is not about plane versus train competition, but rather delivering integrated transport mode. And let market determine the viability and validity of a route. For example, Paris-Brussels route today is exclusively served by train, but this is not the case from London, the London-Paris route, despite Eurostar. So the point is that we should not look for a possibility building infrastructure from scratch, because negative effects on the environment that this development will cause might supersede the solutions sought. And by the time we build it, sustainable aviation fuels would enable airlines to provide much, much better alternatives. Those are some of the challenges that I would like you to reflect today. But to conclude, I really like to speak about Portugal and aviation, which is essentially intertwined. Portugal has a phenomenal leadership role to play, domestically and also internationally. We at IATA are very committed to work hand in hand with authorities, regulators, stakeholders to materialize this ambition. And Portugal Air Summit is a perfect platform for this. I also thank this wonderful summit for bringing you, stakeholders, all together, where we can speak about challenges, where we can brainstorm about opportunities, seek solutions, but most importantly, that we can work together for enabling building, enabling flying. In this case, flying for a world of opportunities. Thank you. Obrigado.